Hello, allow me to introduce myself, as we have never met before. I am known as Vargas, a HasTac unit built by Harold Baker and Anthony Vargas, after they had some issues with the electronics after a Sonic fan game was mentioned that was said to be altered not by the game's creator, but someone else entirely. I am an automated security defense system and was also programmed to detect any electronic anomaly, such as malicious code, and destroy them the moment they are detected. But enough of introducing myself. Harold had been reading to me two stories I thought I might share with the internet. One was made by someone naming themselves IMDEAD about Blue getting revenge on Red for tarnishing his reputation and stripping him of his title of champion. And I also gotten one by ShadowMaleRenamon about a kid named Steven and his Charizard named Mickey. I know these have been shared on the internet and this channel before, but I hope everyone enjoys these as much as I do. Pardon me, sir. How much do you want for this? It's free, take it. What? Are you sure? I can pay you, for. I said you can take it. Now get out of here. The above was a brief exchange of words between a very edgy young man, possibly in his late 20s, and myself at a yard sale I happened by. I always find the most interesting things at yard sales and flea markets. I'm normally there for books, but I'll occasionally happen across something else that I find worth my time. I didn't find any books this time around. The entire sale seemed to be comprised of children's toys. Clothes for both little boys and little girls, as well as some items I'd expect a young married woman to use. Silken night clothes, stacks of cheesy romance novels that I had no interest in. I can't read pure romance. I need something like murder or mystery to make it interesting. Jewelry, as well as several cases of makeup, most of which appeared to be half-used. I found the used makeup to be in bad taste. If you no longer had a use for it, throw it away. Don't try to peddle what's touched your face to other people, it's disgusting. I kept these thoughts to myself, however, as the man running the small junk sale seemed far from stable. As I was about to leave, something blue peeking out from underneath the small, gray plush caught my eye. Colors always catch my attention, especially blue, so I lifted the plush to examine it. To my surprise, it was a Pokemon Blue game. Not that I had been looking for one, but I felt like experiencing a little nostalgia, even though the first generation of games wasn't my favorite. It reflects back to a much simpler time in my life. The cartridge had the word Tears written neatly in black across the image of the Blastoise. I assumed it was a nickname of some sort. Perhaps the previous owner of the game cried a lot. It was within a bunch of child things, Perhaps they were young enough to be labeled a crybaby by others and Tears was just a nicer name. I'm not sure. Anyway, I got the game for free, but I left $1 on the table just so I'd feel better for taking it. When I got home, I inserted the game in my SP and turned it on. The sound at the startup screen was greatly distorted. It sort of fluctuated from being several tones lower than normal to being nothing more than a low rumble. It was unsettling to say the least. Naturally, I assumed the game was faulty, but I thought I'd play through until something froze upon me. The previous owner, this Tears person, still had a game on file, as would be expected with a used game, but no information about playtime, character name, or anything else of that sort was displayed when that option was highlighted. Curious, I chose the previously started game, just to see where they were with everything. A child was bound to have an interesting game with creative names. Insight into the innocent mindset that was slowly becoming rarer with each passing year. Upon choosing the previously saved game, I was met with a black screen and silence. I felt disappointed. The game seemed to already have messed up on me. I was just about to turn it off when a dialog box popped up. I began to read, but the text was moving painstakingly slow. I've been robbed of everything. My title, as champion. My grandfather's respect. Even my Pokemon are dead because of you. Point. I won't stand for this. I will come to find you. I was confused. Who was speaking? Who were they speaking to? My heart rate had picked up out of what I assumed was fear. It had been a while, but I knew this wasn't normal. But curiosity continued to keep me locked onto the game. As the black screen faded away, the music belonging to the inside of the Pokemon Tower began playing perfectly. The sound obviously wasn't as broken as it appeared to be at the beginning. The scene revealed, when the black faded, was that of the appropriate area, the Pokemon Tower. The not-so-familiar-to-me sprite of your in-game rival, Blue, was standing in front of one of the many graves inside the tower. He stayed there for several minutes, the disturbing music continuing to play throughout his silence, before he finally said something. This ends today, for the both of us. With that, he left the tower. My screen followed him. As he stood outside the tower, the music did not change to Lavender Town's normal depressing music. Rather, the haunting tune from inside the graveyard continued to play through on a loop. As much as I wanted to turn down the music, I couldn't bring myself to do so. I couldn't move the character after that. I couldn't tell if it was another assumed glitch of the clearly hacked game, or if it was hesitation on the character's part. After another minute, he finally spoke again. Fly. Even though there was no voice connected to the character in the game, with the speed in which the text moved, There was an almost obvious feel of depression about him. I opened the start menu and checked Blue's party. All he had was a Pidgeot which had no level. I checked its stats. The only move it knew was the requested action of Fly, and all its stats, except for health, were at 0. And, as I found this, I didn't question it and chose to Fly. When the map opened up, it was black save for one small square that was marked Mount Silver. I knew this was impossible. Mount Silver was in Johto, which had yet to be introduced in the original Pokémon games. Regardless, it was my only destination, so I chose it. The typical animation of the trainer sprite turning into the bird sprite and flying off took place, and, sure enough, I landed in front of the cave entrance to Mount Silver. Rather than having the sprite shift back to Blue's sprite, his image moved to the left of Pidgeot's sprite. They faced each other for a minute before a sound much like that of entering or exiting a room played, but in a much higher tone. It sounded as if something had broken. When Blue spoke yet again, "Fly away, you're free." I began to assume the noise was the sound of a Pokeball breaking. The Pidgeot cried out once before doing, as its former master commanded, and flying away. After his final Pokémon flew away, the haunting music continuing to play, he faced the entrance. "I'm coming for you." I now had the impression that this was a mission of revenge, and with the way he was speaking, it was a revenge of the darkest sort. It dawned on me to check the items he had on him. I don't know why this thought crossed my mind, but given the ongoing circumstances, I felt there would be something there. And there was. There was only one item in the list: knife. An item that certainly wasn't programmed into the game under normal circumstances. Anytime I picked the option to use it just to see what it did, Blue said, "Not yet." After that, I was unable to control the character anymore. It was as if he wanted me to get him there and see his single item just to get the gist of what he may be planning, but that was it. The rest was all his own. Blue stepped into the cave, and as he trekked through the stone maze of the cave, he never encountered any Pokémon, but I could faintly hear distorted cries mixed in with the music. I'm not sure, but I believe they could feel the negative emotions coming off Blue, and they cried out in concern. Finally, he reached the chamber that harbored Red in the Gold and Silver games. Blue's pace slowed a little as he approached his rival, and the music, dark as it was already, lowered considerably, making it infinitely darker. As the two rivals faced each other, Red simply greeted Blue with the silence I had become accustomed to in Pokémon Gold. However, Blue didn't take to this very well, as he shouted in apparent anger, "Don't ignore me like you have everything and everyone else." A battle ensued, but the normal music didn't play. The darkened music of the Pokémon Tower continued. By this time, Other people were home and were becoming quite annoyed with the volume of my music, so I was forced to put in headphones, as I still couldn't bring myself to actually lower the volume. Disturbing as it was, the music had some sort of hold on me. I stared at the game screen as the battle opened up. Obviously, since Blue had no Pokemon, he never called anything out. Neither did Red. In the battle option box, the four options of Fight, PK, and Item, and Run weren't all there. All there was to choose at the moment was Item, so, obviously, he chose it. The only item there to use was the one I had mentioned before, Knife. It was quickly selected on its own and went back to the battle scene. Now the only battle option available was Fight. In the Fight menu, Blue only had one attack at his disposal. Murder. I couldn't regain control of the game. There was no option to run. I couldn't bring myself to turn the game off and end what had quickly become a disturbing experience. The only choice there was to sit there and allow Blue to murder Red. After selecting the attack, Blue shouted, "This is for everything," and a typical attack animation much like Tackle played out only. Instead of a single strike, Blue attacked repeatedly. The dark music in the background began to pick up its pace and become more high-pitched. It was painful to listen to, as it reverberated through my headphones, but I never removed them. Red's sprite flickered in and out, as he took the damage and, as his health dwindled to zero, a gurgled screeching sound broke through the noise of the music, replacing it only briefly, as Red's sprite faded into something that looked more like a decaying body before fading away completely with the screech. My heart was pounding. I was beginning to get a throbbing headache, and yet my eyes remained glued to the screen as the remainder of the scene played out. As the music replaced the screen once again, another dialogue box popped up, as Blue spoke yet again. "See you in hell." The battle options box popped up again, Fight the only remaining option. Blue selected it yet again, but instead of murder the attack option available was Suicide. There was a moment of hesitation, but Blue finally attacked himself with less fury than he had Red. As his own health fell to zero, a lower gurgled screech replaced the high-pitched Pokemon Tower music. His sprite faded away. Only when the decayed sprite faded in, he wasn't facing the battlefield. He faced me. His screech continued on, growing in volume to the point where the pain it caused equaled that of a migraine, and yet I still kept the headphones in. My eyes locked onto the dead, hollow eyes of Blue, as he continued to scream, before the screen began to flicker. It was slow at first, but it quickly picked up to a rapid strobe effect. The scream grew in volume and pitch one more time before the screen simply cut to black. I held my breath. My heart pounded so hard against my chest that it hurt. I deeply hoped that it was over, but considering the fact that I couldn't move, or even hear any noise outside of my headphones. I fearfully assumed that it wasn't ellipsis points, and I was right. White lettering began slowly typing out across the black screen, and, as each word formed, I read. I finally got my revenge. The life you ruined is now faded away. But don't think it's over yet. My suffering has ended, but yours has only begun. I'll be watching your strife with a grin on my face. And when it all ends, point, I'll see you in hell. Though I had a full battery just a moment ago, the light turned red and the system turned off. My nose began to spill blood for several minutes, and I'll never be able to describe the terror I felt afterwards. I'll never be able to describe the terror I still feel. You see, the very next day on the news, they announced that the very same man I purchased the game from, I won't release his name, had called the police saying that he had killed his wife 3 days prior and buried her in the backyard. When they reached his house, they had found him by the phone, dead. He had slit his throat and committed suicide. It was also mentioned that, several weeks ago, his 8-year-old son had murdered their 6-year-old son and then killed himself. I assume that the game had done all this, and I'm next. I don't know how much longer I have, nor do I know who will die at my hand, but you deserve to know this. Never play Blue Tears. There are tons of stories out there about hacked Pokemon games. Some of them really quite neat, such as the one about a version, where you get a ghost as a starter. Some are ridiculous, silly stories about individuals dying after playing a game, or the game talking to them. God, don't these writers know less is more, when it comes to these stories? Oh well, I digress. I grew interested in these hacked games that are apparently in any thrift store, on eBay, or handed out by homeless people to random passers-by. I didn't have the pleasure of meeting these creepy people. I merely found this particular cartridge in a trash bin when the garbage truck backed into my neighbor's dumpster. I noticed the game and asked the trash man if I could take it, and he didn't seem to mind. It was thrown away after all. I of course checked with my neighbor to confirm if they actually didn't want it, though they seemed perplexed, as if they'd never seen it in their life. Their son made a grab for it, a little boy who saw the Charizard on the cover, crying out Pokemon. I want money, but his mother told him no, seeing as I found it. He didn't even have a Game Boy anyway, he just liked Pokemon. Thinking nothing more, I simply went home, looking at the cartridge's sticker on the way. Just a plain old red version, the sticker torn slightly across the Charizard's neck, but that was expected with such an old game. I had Bloom version as a kid, so I was a bit eager to see the, albeit minimal, differences red version had. I was rather disappointed by what I saw when the title screen showed up. Pokemon, Strangled Red version. Well, damn it was a hack. Hacks were neat and all, but they had zero monetary value. The original's quite valuable by now, and I wanted to play Red anyway, not this crap. Oh well, it was free, might as well try it. The name wasn't, however, Strangled Red. That made no sense, not even in a morbid description of someone being asphyxiated, as people turned blue when choking, not red. Who knows, maybe there was a pair of these hacks and I just got the red one. The more I thought about this, though, the more interested I became. My initial disappointment turned into curiosity. I wanted to know what the creator had made, and I was going to note everything I saw. The first oddity I noticed was the start screen had a Charizard next to the trainer instead of a Charmander. Also, the Pokemon never cycled through like the original versions did. It just stayed Charizard, even after 5 minutes of waiting. Shrugging, I hit start, noticing there was no Charizard cry, as I did, like there was supposed to be. I saw there was a continue option, so I figured I'd do what everyone did with used games and see what the previous owner had done. No. I blinked in surprise. No? What do you mean no? The game wouldn't let me continue no matter what, though on the 4th attempt, I heard the Charizard cry, quiet and barely audible, but there. Shrugging it off, I decided to just hit new game, like I would have done after checking the old file anyway. The screen cut to black for a while, no Professor Oak, no starting theme, just nothing at all. Eventually, the screen came back, showing a bedroom, 2 beds, 2 TVs, and a computer in the corner. My trainer sprite was the usual one, consistent with the original Red version. I was curious as to why it didn't ask my name, though that was answered, as I opened the pause menu, noticing my trainer was named Steven. No, this isn't my real name or some stupid crap like that. This game isn't self-aware or haunted, at least not that I know of. It just had a name chosen already. Curious, I saw he had the starter amount of money, no badges. He didn't look like Red, though. His hair was longer, almost reaching halfway down his back. Red's usual smile replaced with a confident smirk. Honestly, I found this sprite much cooler than Red. Next I checked out his Pokemon, a single Charmander, level 5, named Mickey. Nothing was odd about it, or should I say her, with the name and all. She had beginning Charmander stats, only knew Scratch and Tail Whip, basic stuff. The game seemed relatively normal. Returning to the game, I walked about the room, noticing Steven's long hair was present on the back of my trainer's sprite when my back was turned to the camera. I didn't recognize the house, but I descended the stairs to see more. Downstairs was another trainer, who spoke to me the instant I came down. Mike, ready yet? Steven, yeah. I assumed this Mike was my rival, pre-decided for me, a replacement of Bloom most likely, though I thought back to the bedroom having two beds, realizing they weren't just rivals, they were brothers. They talked back and forth, basic Pokemon dialogue, become a Pokemaster, catch 'em all, stuff like that, before having a little argument over which is better, Charmander or Squirtle, which of course led to the introduction battle, like the one versus Blue in the lab. Simple enough, scratch, tackle, scratch, tackle, till I won purely for having the first turn. I took note of how much better Steven's sprite looked in combat than Red's, a different pose, his hair looking like it was blowing in the wind, a brief, minor upgrade, but still, much nicer. I left the house after some more banter with my brother, stepping out to the Pallet Town theme. Going to the east, I found this was indeed Pallet Town. The house was simply on the outskirts to the west. I noted there was no mysterious grassy field like in normal Pallet Town. Wandering about, I decided to check in on Red's home. His mother was inside, and when I talked to her, she commented on how handsome Steven looked, hoping her son would look up to him as a role model for when he became a trainer himself next year, which of course led me to realize this game took place a year before the original Pokemon. Red was even upstairs, playing the SNES in his room, commenting I'm gonna be the best to when it's my turn. I was starting to like this hack. It was interesting, a completely new adventure, a different character. Hell, Steven even seemed to have a history with the people in his town, a reputation, a personality beyond a silent protagonist. The people in town talked to him as a person, making conversation, not just spouting tutorial crap. Even Blue's sister had new dialogue. They seemed to be in a relationship too, as the dialogue ended with a kiss and a heart over her head. Professor Oak simply wished me well, giving me a Pokédex to aid my adventure. He wasn't giving it to me to be the reason behind the adventure like every other Pokémon game out there. He gave it to me out of kindness, something to help me on my way, a gift. I was liking this more and more with each second. The game seemed to have an actual story now. I was somebody, not just a cookie-cutter protagonist anyone could be, not some blank sheet that could be replaced without notice. The story was different, though the actual gameplay remained unchanged. I went north like I was supposed to, went from town to town, collected badges, received the praise of the leaders. Steven's fame even seemed to spread, as some NPCs would talk like they knew him. I used Mickey for every battle, and she was growing surprisingly fast. She handled Brock with ease, even pounded Misty with no trouble at all. She wasn't as adversely affected by super effective attacks as others, did more damage than a regular Charmander. She was a veritable powerhouse. She even became a Charizard at the mere level of 25. Not bad at all, I must say. Things started to get weird though as soon as I reached Lavender Town. I know, Lavender Town is the focus behind every creepy story and the like, but it was the only place that was noticeably different. There was no Team Rocket invasion, which I found odd, though I did remember this was a year in the past, so the invasion wouldn't occur until Red's time. I tried to enter Pokemon Tower, aiming to get a Ghastly, but that's when it go odd. Steven, I have no reason to be here. Steven wouldn't go into Pokemon Tower no matter what I did. This was weird. I mean, hell, there are a million places in Kanto you really have no need to be. Little random houses with nothing but children, NPCs for example. Why was it here that Steven wouldn't enter? With a shrug, I figured I wouldn't need a Ghastly, seeing as Mickey could handle anything, so I simply went on my way. Lavender Town serving no purpose other than a passageway with a poke center. The game progressed normally from there. The remaining gyms fell and eventually I made my way to the Elite Four and defeated them. As with Blue, my brother Mike was there before me, initiating the championship battle, which Mickey swept with ease. The aftermath of the battle was quite pleasant. None of the tension that was present between Red and Blue at the end of their match. The brothers congratulated each other on their progress and shook hands, before the screen went white. No Hall of Fame, nor any credits. When the screen came back, it was at the house again. The two brothers sitting at the computer, conversing with each other. Steven, I don't want to. Mike, come on, I just gotta borrow her for a second to finish the Pokédex. The entry won't register, unless she recognizes me as master for just a second. Steven, but she's my Mickey ellipsis points. Mike, I promise I'll give her back. Come on, please. Is greater than yes? No? I was a bit perplexed, so I hit no to be cautious. Mike, come on, please. No. Mike, come on, please. I realized this would simply continue to loop, until I hit yes, so I did, just to see what would happen. Mike, alright, this will just take a sec, then we'll both be Pokémasters. Steven. The screen changed to the animation shown when two people trade Pokémon, which I found a bit weird. Seeing as I was solo, but whatever, this was what was apparently supposed to happen. Mickey went first. I watched lazily as she began to travel down the trading tube. Snap! That made me jump, the sudden noise resonating in my silent bedroom, loud due to the volume being way up. Looking at the screen, I noticed the game had seemed to freeze. Mickey still in mid-trade, but the game wasn't doing anything. With a sigh, I just turned off the game, wondering when my last save was. When the game turned back on, I stared for a moment at the start screen. There was no charizard next to the trainer. Upon pressing start, I saw the new game option was absent, leaving only continue. This was ellipsis point strange to say the least, so I selected it, the game staring without even showing my stats as usual. My jaw dropped at what I was greeted with. 1 year later, the Lavender Town theme came first, playing its normal way, the screen slowly fading in from blackness. Steven was in the Pokemon Tower, which made the music even stranger, seeing, as the tower had its own theme. He was standing in front of a tombstone, not doing anything. Wondering what was going on, I pressed A. Steven. Confused, I tried walking, realizing I was indeed in control at the moment. I brought up the pause menu and checked my party. Mickey was gone. Not just Mickey, all Pokemon. He had nothing. The Pokédex was absent from the menu. His bag was empty. Honestly concerned now, I checked his trainer card. He had no money. He had no badges. His playtime was 8,795 hours, which was impossible, as I had only 30 logged in before. But that wasn't the strangest part. His picture, the picture of the handsome, confident young trainer was different. His eyes were blank, his face turned slightly down, that smirk of his was gone, replaced by a lack of any expression at all. That long hair of his, before in a perfect perm, was now messy and unkempt. I couldn't look at him anymore. Closing the menu, I went to move out of the tower, but with every step I took away from the tombstone, the screen flickered, like it did when a Pokemon was poisoned. Gulping, I brought up the trainer card again. His picture was getting worse. Every step I took, he hung his head more and more, his shoulders slumped, he bent over. By the time I had exited the tower, he was on his knees, hands to his face, hair draped across him. I had guessed already what was going on, but this clinched it. I began to put some things together in my mind. I had always wondered why there was no champion in the original games besides your rival. Why is it you, the protagonist, had to be your rival, when he just waltzed in, no previous champion to challenge? Then, it struck me. The answer was right here. The previous champion gave up. His precious Mickey was apparently dead, and with her, so died part of him. His Pokédex, the other Pokémon, his badges, his fame, all of it, he threw it away. In that year, the year that I missed, the year where all those hours came from, I even did the math. There is 8,765 hours in a year. Add that to my 30 from before and it matched up. Even so, the game kept going. This should have been an ending, I thought. I mean, what else was there to do? I had no Pokédex, no Pokémon, not anything. What was I supposed to be doing? I talked to everyone in the town, but they all said similar things. Are you okay? Still mourning, I see. Everything will be alright. Please? Is there anything we can do? Stephen never replied to them, and they all simply said the same things over and over. I couldn't put the game down now. This was all so strange. Curious, I headed off into the tall grass, and eventually got into a battle with a Rattata. No Pokemon was sent out, just Steven's sprite. I was wondering how I'd battle. Wild Rattata left you be. The battle ended without anything happening. This was certainly interesting, and it happened with every Pokemon I encountered. Wild Pidgey ignored you. Wild Ponyta wandered off. The music never changed either. No matter where I went, Lavender Town came from the speakers, following me, sometimes slowed down slightly, sometimes not. I searched everywhere, every town, talked to everybody, wondering just what the hell I needed to do. My frustration was mixing with the depressing atmosphere of all this, making the experience altogether unnerving and uncomfortable, but I couldn't tear myself away. I was starting to get a bit angry, though, nobody telling me anything besides giving me their condolences and trying to give me items like lemonade or coffee, each met with, "Stephen, no." I slapped myself for idiocy, suddenly realizing how the likely answer was right in front of me. Pallet Town, of course. When I went there, though, which took a long time having to walk, no Pokemon to fly with, no bicycle to ride, and Steven only seemed to move half the regular movement speed, it wasn't much different. I first tried talking to Professor Oak. "These things happen, you were just unlucky." Next I tried Blue's sister. "Please? Don't leave home again." Red's mom wouldn't even talk to me at all. With nowhere else in mind to go, I walked to the west, finding the house from the beginning, which I had never entered since leaving Pallet Town. Inside was Mike, but talking to him was just as useless. "Mike, I'm so sorry." I pondered for a moment. If this really was the ending, Stephen doomed to do nothing but roam Kanto in misery, haunted by the memories, forced to listen to everyone's concerns about him. As a last-ditch effort to do anything, I went to the bedroom and walked over to the bed. "Stephen, I'm going to sleep." The screen faded to black for a moment, but then slowly faded back in, the world having a black tint to it, the Mike's sprite laying in the other bed. I assumed this meant it was night. "Stephen, I'm going to do it." "Do what?" Again, I had no idea. Tried inspecting everything in the room. Nothing happened. As soon as I left the house, another dialogue. "Stephen, it can bring her back. It can do anything." What in the hell was it? Something that could do anything. I couldn't for the life of me figure it out. Wandering about, I tried to leave Pallet Town the usual way. "Stephen, not that way." He wouldn't go any further. I tried the homes. Steven, screw them. I quirked my eyebrow at that, forgetting for a moment this was not a real Pokemon game. The vulgarity just took me off guard. I continued to look around, but there was nowhere I could go, until I accidentally stepped on the ocean, and Steven walked right in, only the upper half of his sprite visible, like the swimmers you encounter in the Cerulean Gym. I didn't know he could swim. Steven, the missing one. Missing one? I paused for a moment. No, he couldn't possibly mean that. I hadn't tried the missing no trick on this hack yet, but it just fit too well. That had to be what he meant. I surfed all the way towards Cinnabar. I began to feel something was off, more so than this already was. Silence. The Lavender Town theme had stopped. There was no noise at all, nor were there any Pokemon. I just kept going, finding Cinnabar and surfing up and down the east coast. Lo and behold, Wild Missingno appeared. Steven, mine. Wild Missingno was caught. What the hell? Steven didn't do anything. He just commanded that atrocity of broken data to join him. No, become his possession. And it did. I was getting more and more disturbed by this all. Checking the start menu, I saw Missingno was not in my party, but instead an item, making things even stranger. I checked the trainer card as well. Steven has his back to me, his long hair draped behind him, his hands in his pockets, nothing else. Remembering what he said at the start of this night, I realized what I had to do. Ellipsis points. I surfed to land and made my way northeast to, where else? Lavender Town. Along the way, I noticed all the trainers, oddly still out at this hour, wouldn't look at Steven, all of them turning, when he passed, even those that were normally static. I tried talking to one of the officers in the guardhouse type buildings. Just go. They all said the same thing, though one sent chills down my spine. Sometimes that is best. My hands were sweating by this point. Steven was about to try the impossible, something some would see as a crime against nature, which many of these people shared that opinion. I steeled myself. It's just a game. And I was going to complete it. It took an eternity to reach Pokemon Tower, but I got there eventually, taking a deep breath and heading toward the tombstone. I remembered which one, the image of Steven standing before it was burned into my mind after all. First, I tried inspecting it. Steven. Mickey. Nothing happened. With a gulp, I opened the menu and selected Missingno from the bag. Oak, Steven, don't use it. I was reminded of when Professor Oak would magically tell you that you couldn't use a key item somewhere, like when using the bicycle in a building. Though the message this time was different, even worse, Steven responded to it. Steven, in a world that cheated me, why should I play fair? Steven used it. Steven obtained Mickey. What in God's name did I obtain? I couldn't tell you, because the game took away my control. Without my input, Stephen began to leave the tower on his own, walking single step by single step. The Lavender Town theme started again, as he left the tower and began his excruciatingly slow journey against my will. Every time he crossed one of the borders, where the music would change, it got progressively slower, more and more disturbing. By the time he reached Cerulean City, it was a demonic rumbling. I just stared, watching him, trying to guess where he was going, but it was getting more and more obvious. He was heading to Pallet Town. The music had all but stopped when he got there, playing single note by single note. He went exactly where I had guessed, right to his own house, inside, and up the stairs. At this point, there was no music. Stephen moved step by step, stopping at his brother's bed, turning to face him. At first, though the game froze, he didn't do anything, simply stood there, and I couldn't move him. I did, however, find out I could open the pause menu. I was terrified to look, but I couldn't stop myself. I selected his trainer card. There was a low growl noise, like a distorted Pokemon cry. Stephen was looking at me again, directly at the screen. He was hunched over, his bangs obscuring his face. His hair was wild and feathered out. Between his bangs, there wasn't even a face at all, just black, two red eyes looking straight forward, a white grin contrasting with the darkness. That wasn't all. His name was now S!3v3N. I couldn't look away, my eyes glued to his, not breaking contact for some time. My vision was getting blurry, until I couldn't see very well. My face grew wet. I was crying, like a baby. There was nothing I could do to hold back the tears. I was with this boy from the start. I built him up to greatness, and was then forced to watch his decline after a tragic accident. And now, he was this thing, this abomination. I watched him go insane. Halting my tears, wiping my eyes, I closed out of the trainer card and tried to save the game, wanting to just quit. The game informed me this was impossible. Nothing can be saved now. The pause menu wouldn't close no matter what I did, so with no other option, I checked the bag. Nothing happened. I checked Pokemon, and there was one. A single sprite met me. It had 0 HP. Its status, dead. Its name Mickey. I selected it, and I was greeted with 4 options. Is greater than status it's hurt. Is greater than switched never. Is greater than close, no. Is greater than strangle. My fingers shaking, I selected strangle, and the menu closed, showing Stephen in the room again. S!3v3N, goodbye. Snap. The game shut itself off. I was more dumbfounded than frightened. In a bit of shock, I turned it back on, the title screen showing the Manic S! 3v3 and a horribly glitched Charizard. I pressed start, then continue. All I saw was a zoomed out view of Pallet Town, showing Steven's home to the west, tall grass surrounding it, those immovable stones blocking it from the rest of the town. The image was completely static, no music, no movement, before fading to white, going back to the title screen. It was, as it had been, when I first popped it in. A trainer and a Charizard. I attempted to hit continue. No,